All right. Welcome, everybody. December. It's our final fall human experience speaker. Thank you for coming and being here. Um, like we do every month, we're going to get started with introducing why we're here. And why we're here is to reinforce and to continue pressing into our social work competencies. And again, the competency that we are intentional about in this space is our third competency around engaging anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion in our social work practice. And so just like we do every month, how I'm going to start is I'm going to read our competency. It's through repetition, it's through repeating, which is what repetition is, but it's repetition and over time. This is how we start to learn things, how things soak in for us, and they become over time second nature. We aren't as intentional as we were in the beginning because we intentionally come back and rehearse the competency, reinforcing what it means, listening to speakers and applying what we're hearing people saying and making sense of it through just our training and what we know. So with that, you all have copies of the critical reflection sheet we use every month. You can read along with me or you can just listen. But our social work competency says that social workers understand how racism and oppression shape human experiences and how these two constructs influence practice at the individual, family, group, organizational, and community levels, and in policy and research. Social workers understand the pervasive impact of white supremacy and privilege and use their knowledge, awareness, and skills to engage in anti-racist practice. Social workers understand how diversity and intersectionality shape human experiences and identify development and identity development and affect equity and inclusion. The dimensions of diversity are understood as the intersectionality of factors, including but not limited to age, caste, class, color, culture, disability and ability, ethnicity, gender, gender identity and expression, generational status, immigration status, legal status, marital status, political ideology, race, nationality, religion and spirituality, sex, sexual orientation, and tribal sovereign status. Social workers understand that this intersectionality means that a person's life experiences may include oppression, poverty, marginalization, and alienation, as well as privilege and power. Social workers understand the societal and historical roots of social and racial injustices and the forms and mechanisms of oppression and discrimination. Social workers understand cultural humility and recognize the extent to which a culture's structures and values, including social, economic, political, racial, technological, and cultural exclusions, may create privilege and power, resulting in systemic oppression. So I'm quite excited that Mayor Kari Niedfeldt-Thomas, did I get it all? We practiced this on the way up, so I feel quite happy about myself. I just have to throw that in there. Agreed to come and talk with us today. She's the second mayor in as many years that has agreed to come and share her experiences with us. I'm going to start, we're just going to have a conversation, and really we invite you guys into the conversation as well. So if you have questions that come up as Kari is talking and sharing, feel free to raise your hand or ask that question. We'll maybe even try to make some time towards the end to open it up to questions. But in way of kind of introducing yourself and giving your biography, would you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are and how you got to the current place that you're in?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Excited to be able to connect with all of you. I feel very fortunate that at a couple of points in my career, I worked in organizations that had social workers. And so I understand how important your roles are, or your future roles that you all are aspiring to move into. And so I will want to weave some of those stories in also along the way. So we can start at the beginning if you want. I was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And when people ask me, am I a Packer or a Viking fan, I tell them that I'm a Wild fan. That's what politicians do, right? You don't answer directly. Okay, so I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I I was an only child, and I grew up with my mom, and I was raised. We lived with my grandparents at the time. My parents divorced when I was very young. I don't remember them exactly living together. They got married young, they were 20. And, you know, it's stressful when you're both going to school, then somebody drops out to work and you're raising a baby. And then this was all during Vietnam War era. And my father made a decision that he wanted to become a Minneapolis police officer. At the time, if you agreed to do that kind of service, that was a trade for you being drafted. And so he chose to move to Minneapolis and become a Minneapolis police officer. Was going to send for us. Let's just say things didn't work out. They got divorced. So my mom and I lived with my grandparents for a period of time. My mom remarried when, so that was probably about 5 when they divorced. And then my mom remarried when I was 9. And then my mom's boyfriend, Jack, became my dad. And the Niedfeldt in my last name was Jack Niedfeldt. He adopted me when I was 12. And then my parents have 2 more children together. My sisters, Kendra and Nicole, and technically they're my half sisters, but I really think of them as my full sisters. We argue like sisters, and we swap clothing like sisters, and all of those things. So I was raised by them. I very early in my life, though, knew that I was committed to social justice, and I could tell you many stories of things that I did while I was in middle school to high school, of being activist oriented and working to fight oppression that I saw. And I think sometimes you know when you're seeing something that's really wrong, and then there are times when you're like, this just doesn't feel right. And I don't know if it's wrong, but it doesn't feel good. So I very quickly got involved in doing activities that ran for Student Senate. I was on the debate team. I said I was a horrible cheerleader, but I was a great debater, and I still am. And so I knew that I wanted to continue to work on social justice issues. We talked a little bit as a prep to this. My faith is very important to me. I would tell you that my religion is Catholicism, but my faith is my relationship with God. And I know all of you are here because you similarly are seeking what that relationship is. And that has played a critical role in my trajectory in life. I actually was asked by my church to be a free mass speaker a couple of weeks ago on the Feast of Christ the King. And they interspersed my story, and we could talk more about like what called me to run for office. But I do believe that you all will be called at various points, and you're going to say no a lot. And then there are going to be times when you have to say yes. And some of that will be around social justice issues that will just hit you in a way. It could be in your career at some point that you're going to be asked to do something that just doesn't feel ethical, and you'll just know in your heart when the right time is to do something. So moving ahead, I went to school at American University in Washington, D.C., undergraduate degree in international studies. I wanted to be in the Foreign Service because I thought I wanted to represent the U.S. government abroad. And then I very quickly started realizing that I was uncomfortable with a lot of decisions that the government would make. And so maybe that wasn't the career I should go for. So I decided to work in the nonprofit sector when I graduated. I worked for an environmental nonprofit organization for 8 years. I moved around with them, working on, and I ran offices in Providence, Rhode Island. So I went to school in Washington, D.C., graduated, went to Providence, Rhode Island, then Baltimore, did some stints in Texas and in Pittsburgh, but most of my time was in the DC metro area. Met my husband through working through there. My husband's Jewish, so having an interfaith relationship requires a lot of understanding and conversation. He would tell you that he is culturally so, not religiously so, and and our kids have been raised Catholic, and that's a part of it. So we have 2 boys. One of them was born out in the DC area, but I refer to it as an unwritten prenuptial agreement. We'd move closer to my family at some point, and I cashed in 1998, and we moved to the Twin Cities. And his family was going to leave the DC area. They ended up not, but I said, we're going to be out here all by ourselves, and like we have a little one, he's 2 years old. Sometimes it's nice to have somebody to help out if we want to go on a date or something. So that's why we moved to the Twin Cities. And at the time, my biological father, he was here with his wife at the time, and so that was nice. We were able to kind of reconnect in some ways. We stayed with them. They were in St. Anthony. We eventually bought a house in Mounds View. We now live in New Brighton. So that's kind of the moving around and kids. I have my one son is 28, Daniel. Both kids went to Irondale High School in New Brighton. And my youngest, Evan, is 22 and still lives at home. He's going to ARCC, Anoka Ramsey Community College right now. So when I think about my career and the work that I've done, I worked, as I noted, for a group, Clean Water Action. All of you should find me on LinkedIn, by the way, and send me a note and connect to me. This is important for you to build your professional network, so don't hesitate. I will say yes to you. So I won't make you have to write a big note to me. I'll see that you have Bethel and I will say yes. So when I graduated, I knew I wanted to work for change, that I saw opportunities in this world and what could I do? So I started working for Clean Water Action in Washington, D.C. It's an organization that's grassroots organizing, and I started out as a field canvasser going door to door, working on issues, talking to people. You're doing fundraising, getting people to do letter writing campaigns. You're working to get good candidates who support the environment elected. And I did that work for a period of time. And then, as I noted, I ran offices in places around the country. And then I moved into our development department, which is fundraising. So working on events, and we had grants that we would write. And then I also worked for a period of time in the finance department. And it was a great organization, very progressive in that we were able to bring my oldest son to work with us for the first year. We had in our office, one of us had a pack and play and one had an exerciser. And we were able to just take turns with him. It's like, okay, it's nap time. Let's put him in the CEO's office. He's at a meeting. I mean, it was that kind of a place where somebody else was doing it too. People were really welcoming. They would take baby breaks and go walk him around all the time, and that was awesome. But then he started getting into computer courts, and we needed to get him into daycare. So we left the DC area when he was 2. When we moved here, we eventually bought a house. We wanted to own a home, and we're at a point where we felt like we had lived in apartments for a significant portion of our life, and it was time to do something else. And so I think one of the reflections I have when other electeds or people who are wanting to run for office, there was one in our city recently that she did not win, and that like to complain about people in apartments. A lot of the folks that you're going to work with live in apartments. You probably live in apartments. Maybe your families live in apartments. People who live in apartments are good people. They work hard, and it's important to sometimes challenge stereotypes that if someone owns a home, they're better than someone who doesn't. And that's really hard in society. And people who don't have that, you hear about intergenerational wealth building, and that owning property in our country can help to do that. So yes, it's great to encourage people to get into a home, but then they have to be able to continue to afford it, and they have to continue to struggle with the challenges of when the roof leaks or your basement's flooding or what that might mean. So I'll put a pin on the apartment thing. So after we moved here, I started working for the Mental Health Association of Minnesota, which was an organization that does statewide advocacy and education on mental health issues. We had, as I noted, social workers on our staff that work as individual advocates, helping people navigate the system. And if you think about it, the part of your body that is supposed to help you reason and figure out how to make decisions is the part of your body that's challenged in working to help you reason. And so having individual advocates to help people is really important. So I worked there for a period of time. Then I worked also for Neighborhood House, which is a social service agency on the west side of St. Paul. As many a first generation immigrant makes a stop going through settlement houses, such as Neighborhood House. There are settlement houses all over the country, all over the world, and they are designed, how they were originally designed and how they are today. The social workers don't live on site like they used to. Now, the social workers go live where they live and they come to work, but they help first generation immigrants and families navigate their way through systems. They are also the groups that are very often running the community centers in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And Neighborhood House had at the time worked with like 50 different ethnic groups. I think there was a former board member who always had a great story of where there were little kids that went to the family center on site and were in the youth program. And these kids speak multiple languages and they're running through the halls as friends. And he was like, they don't care what language their friends speak. They just care that they have fun with their friends. And that was always to me like just a great symbol of what that organization and other organizations like it were able to do. I went in as the Vice President of Finance and Administration, and then I was president there for a period of time also. That work that I did there, I had, between those two jobs, I had my now 22-year-old, and then I took this job, and I knew it was going to be a big job, but I didn't realize how big a job it was going to be because we were working to get some federal funding to support our new community center we were going to build. And I started the beginning of September, and by the middle of October, Senator Wellstone, for any of you who know who that was, he and his wife and their daughter were in a plane crash and they died. We were contacted by the interim Senator Barkley asking what it would take to have the building become a living memorial to the Wellstones. So my full-time job became like squared, like it quadrupled almost, it felt like. And I was working 60 to 80 hours a week with a brand new baby. I would take my breast pump and I'd plug it into my car as I would drive to work, and I would pump on my way to work. And my husband was like, "Are you not worried that the truckers are going to see you?" And I was like, "I got work to do. I got things to get done. If they really want to drive off the road looking at, I don't really care." So I will just tell you, that's the kind of person I am. Like, we have stuff to get done. We're going to make it happen. But it required there were a lot of hard choices and a lot of balancing that had to happen as a working mom. And, but I also felt this importance, this legacy, that this building was going to be named after Paul and Sheila Wellstone, and it is. It's now the Paul and Sheila Wellstone Center for Community Building. It's on the west side of St. Paul, and it's a beautiful building. We made a donation, so we have a couple of seats in the auditorium with our names and our kids' names on it. I was like, well, I said they'll be in therapy the rest of their life, that their mom works so much. All good. It's all good. But it was a great experience professionally. My kids remember it. And I do know that the work that I've done in those kinds of organizations really made a difference. I was at a point, though, where I wanted to advance professionally, and I felt there were a lot of skills that I didn't have. And so I applied mid-career for a Bush Fellowship. The Bush Foundation gives mid-career fellowship opportunities. You have to apply for it. You have to go through a very rigorous application process, and I was awarded one, and that allowed me to go back to school for my MBA mid-career. So I started my MBA program when my now 22-year-old started kindergarten, and the older son was in 6th grade. And I would take them to study sessions, like across the hall. I would lock them in like the study room at the Carlson School. I'd be like, "Do not leave, watch your videos. I'm gonna be over here in the study session on statistics." So my husband and I, we had to balance a lot. It was a lot of work, but I took time out of my career to get my MBA and have felt, I know that my mom, as a single mom, would always tell us that you have to get your education. It's the one thing that people can't take away from you. And that's advice that you're going to also be able to give to any of your clients someday, or the people that you work with. But it's important for you too. This is a room full of all women, and you have to have your education. You have to be able to support yourself and your family if needed. You hope that you're going to have a partner in life to help you with that, but you don't always know that you will. And so to me, that was really important that I do it. And I think I've been a good role model for my kids about how to be a good mom and go to their hockey games. And at the same time, mom has to also volunteer for other things, not just for being the Sunday school coordinator for the Christmas musical, popcorn chair for Boy Scouts. I mean, I feel like I volunteered a lot for my kids, but I also serve on boards. Boards that help to feed me professionally, help me to feel like I'm continuing to give back. And I have a magnet on my fridge that a friend gave to me that says, please stop me from volunteering. And I ignore it every day. So then I'll say after I graduated with my MBA, I then did some contract work at Thrivent for a period of time, new business development. They were building a new insurance concept for the broader Christian market. And I worked there on some of that new business development. And with that, afterward, I then left to go work at the Mosaic Company. I led the corporate foundation and supply chain sustainability work. And then I left there, did some consulting for a couple of years on my own. My youngest was having he has ADHD and was having some executive function challenges as a freshman in high school. And it was really a good time to let me be able to dig in and be mama bear when I had to at the school district to make sure his 504 plan was followed, but at the same time for me to be able to have some balance in life. And then I was approached by a group that I had worked with when I worked inside of a company, and that was CECP. That's where I currently work, Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose. It was founded by Paul Newman and other corporate CEOs to be a CEO force for good. Some of you probably know of Newman's Own. How many have had Newman's Own like salad dressing? You know who Paul Newman is, head on the salad dressing bottle. I don't know how many of you know that he was a CEO, he was an actor and a philanthropist, and so he's one of our founders. And at CECP, we work with the world's largest companies on their corporate purpose strategies, which are defined as societal community investment, ESG, sustainable business, so ESG, environmental social governance, diversity, equity, and inclusion, helping companies tell the story, and employee engagement. So that's my day job. That's what I do for 50 hours a week, is I am the managing director and COO. And then my 24/7 job, I am the mayor of the city of New Brighton. And that is, that fluctuates how much time I spend on that work. It could be that some week it may be 10 hours. And then there may be one week where there are meetings every single night and we have a 300-page sets of documents we have to read before a city council meeting. And then I'm all weekend working on that too. And again, I don't really not volunteer. I do a lot, and that brings me joy. And you only do as much as what brings you joy and what your family arrangements allow for you to do. And there have been times where I didn't feel that I could do that, but a moment came and I said I would run for office, and there we go. So was that too long?
No.
Did I cover it all?
Okay. I was hoping you had another minute so I could make my last note here.
Okay.
So, one, take Kari up on her invitation to connect with her on LinkedIn. It is not necessarily LinkedIn. I mean, it is, yes, connect with on LinkedIn, but networking in my professional space has probably brought me the most opportunity and enrichment in my adult professional life. Meeting people, having opportunities, so many things. And so, selfishly, for your own trajectory of where you want to go and what you want to do that, but also just to open up your experience and to enrich your adult life, do that. And reach out. People say yes a lot more than they say no when you have questions and when you want to connect. So, all right. So do that. Follow up, connect with Kari. So many things I want to ask you about.
Yep.
But just real quickly, because you do talk about, yes, 50 hours a week, I do this. And now I'm adding on top of that this, which we just got done out of an election season. There's some seasons, I'm assuming this, being in office or running for mayor is that 10 to whatever hours a week. And then there are other moments, running campaigns, trying to help other people where it's way, way, way more than 10 hours a week. As students who I'm sure at this part of the year, we feel this, we feel, our cups and our jars and our time is only so much. What well, first of all, did you say no at any other time about this, and or what was like yes? Like, what was the motivation at this time to say yes and not to say no for taking this extra thing on for you?
I have been asked to serve on a lot of different boards of directors, and so I have. So if you go to LinkedIn, you'll see the different boards that I've been on, in addition to, I mentioned all the things I've done to help my kids out and their activities and my professional work. So boards of directors, meaning it's a nonprofit, let's say, or I'm on the board of directors for a fraternal benefit society. I mentioned Thrivent, one that's similar to Thrivent, it's based in Milwaukee. I'm the board of directors there. It's a company, but it's a fraternal benefit insurance company. So it focuses on serving the community alongside offering products like insurance. Finnegan's Community Fund, or you know Finnegan's Beer Company, Brewco, they focus on giving their profits away to hunger relief in the community. And so it's a social enterprise, and so I've been on their board. So I've done a lot of board service, and I had been asked at one point would I ever consider running for school board, and I was like, yeah, like I love our school district, I love the Muncie schools, but it wasn't something that I felt passionate about in that way. And I was like, I don't know, no, probably not. And then other people would say, you should run for office someday. You really understand policy. You understand these issues. You could speak to people. You could speak to people across the aisle, red and blue. You can speak both. And I was like, whatever. Just kind of blowing people off, right? But I do feel that there was this window of time. Oh, another funny moment. Like, as a woman professional, you want to be taken seriously. And sometimes you're not. I work for an agricultural company, the Mosaic Company. There would be times the agronomists would go into a meeting, the men agronomists, and they wouldn't invite me or another woman that should have been in that meeting. And I would be like, oh, you guys had a meeting. Oh, yeah, I didn't think you were available. No, I'm here. I wasn't traveling. Like, those things happen. And as a woman, you just get irritated. And you're like, all right, I got to figure out how to work harder. I got to figure out how to be smarter. I got to figure out how to work around some of those situations. But, you know, I will be honest, I would love in my lifetime to see a woman president. So when Hillary Clinton lost, I was like so upset. I was like, what? The next day I was like, how, if she didn't have a chance, how could I ever have a chance to, not that I was planning to run for president, let's be clear, I'm not planning to run for president, but I was like, if she could have done it, and I was like, I'm gonna run for office, and my husband, to make me laugh, because he knew how irritated I was, he was like, well, if the world isn't ready for Hillary, they're not ready for you, and he has to laugh about that. So I could say, like, those feelings of like, I'm worthy, I have opinions that matter, and I need to put them into action. And I know that I have great experience that could help others. And I do feel that my commitment to social justice and working on issues over many years of seeing where there are disparities, the statement that you read earlier, where people are disenfranchised or they're unempowered or they don't understand that they have power, that's hard. Like when someone grows up feeling unempowered and you come to tell them, no, actually, you can advocate for yourself. You can access resources. You can do this. Like all of those are, it's a place of speaking into someone, and you only have to hope that someone can hear you, but sometimes people can't. And in those moments, I also know that I can advocate for others. So as I noted, like I'm comfortable going mama bear if I have to for my kids. I'm comfortable speaking out for others and speaking out for myself, but more importantly for other people. Like I feel like I have been brave enough to be able to capture the voices of others and speak for them when needed. And so at various points in my life. So I will say that it was like just before COVID started, and I was traveling for my day job. I didn't have a mayor job at that time. I was traveling for work. I remember being at the airport and reading that residents of affordable housing in New Brighton had been evicted illegally, that their lease had been broken by the landlord. They were going to go around and fix up apartments on like a schedule, and they decided it was too expensive, the new landlord of this building. So they evicted everyone, breaking the lease under a time frame that was not supposed to have happened. The city didn't do anything about it. There was one city council person who was in the paper advocating for it. And like, I'm heading to my plane, and I'm like, who are these people on our city council that are allowing this to happen? I was irritated. I also knew that we had an inclusive community task force that had made a series of recommendations about how to make our community more inclusive, and that nothing had happened with it for 3 years. So this was all like January 2020. Then the pandemic hits, and I see leaders struggling to talk about COVID, struggling to talk about what should be happening. And again, no one had ever done this before. So you got to give some grace to people that are just learning how to do some things that they never really had to do. But I was like, don't we have a public health infrastructure in this country that we've invested in? And why are people not listening to public health officials who understand science and have researched these things for years? Like, there's just all these things weren't making sense about where's this dearth of leadership. At the time, I watched really cruel comments or statements being made from public officials, and I was like, what is going on in this world? And then the murder of George Floyd happened, and that week was rough for me in my day job. The leaders that I work with inside of companies were contacting me, texting me, emailing me, calling me, and they're like, this is our chance. This is the moment that we all have been working for to get our companies to do something. Can you work to get a statement out from CECP to the CEOs so the CEOs can start to say something at our companies? Because they don't know what to say. They're uncomfortable. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So I had a whole bunch of things cleaned up at our organization that we needed to get cleaned up, statements we were making, our anti-discrimination statement, a lot of things like that. And at the same time, talking to all these leaders, and then I'm advocating with our CEO, who's a really nice guy. But he was like, well, I think this is just in Minnesota. And I was like, I don't think this is just Minnesota. By Monday, he agreed with me. But at that point, when I closed my computer on that Friday, what was it? Friday, May 25th or 26th, I'd have to go back and look at the calendar. I was like drained. I was exhausted. And I was just so frustrated with our world. And so that night, our family had dinner, and it was lockdown, right? So it was me, our 2 boys. One was 22 at the time, one was 18. Is that right? Their age range, 23? One was 23, one was 18. We had just had a college graduation for my older son in our living room. And our younger son, we were about to have his high school graduation in our living room. So, everybody had lost out on those moments. The younger son was very critical of the police actions. Our older son had changed his degree from aerospace engineering at Iowa State to criminal justice because he had loved his experience with the New Brighton Police Department as a police explorer when he was in high school, and he wanted to become a police officer. So I'm sitting in our living room with both of them feeling angst. I'm watching on TV the police precinct that my father had served in that was burning. And I was like, what is going on? Why can't people in our world figure out how to get along? Like, I can be this bridge in my head. There was like this, why can't we all figure out how to talk to each other? Why can't we all figure out how to make something happen? And I said, how I referred to it as, I felt this feeling come over me, and I said out loud, I've always said I should run for office. It was like I was saying it to the people in the room. I was saying it to God, maybe. God made me say it. I don't know. But this feeling came over me. And our youngest was sitting next to me, and he turned to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, so why don't you? And I said, okay, I will. And then the next morning, my husband was like, so what did you get yourself into? And he's laughing. And I was like, we're running an election, it looks like. So that's how I decided to run for office. It was that moment of saying, I can do something and I need to stop assuming somebody else is going to do it. I have to step up and make it happen. I have to stick my mouth out there and make things happen for others and not just assume that I have to live my life and do what I want to do and that I can then be irritated with other people. And I think that same moment is still here in society to people. Our democracy needs people to step up and do things. It doesn't mean everybody has to run for office. That takes time and money and fundraising and all of that work. But we all have a role to play in making a difference for other people. And so that's the moment I decided to run, and we've not looked back. Because it is a family decision. I gave them all till the filing period to tell me, no, don't do it. And they were like, no, we think you should. I said, I think it's because they didn't want me to tell them to clean their room anymore, but anyway.
Yeah. It's 10 less hours mom's at home.
Exactly.
So you all may be thinking as well, I've got probably another 2.5 hours worth of like curiosities and questions about everything before you even ran for mayor. Like a few things you said, I'm like, wow, I feel like I want to ask more questions about this. But so you ran for mayor. What I would love to be able to hear from you is, sometimes we think like, because they listen to you now, right? The students are listening to you now, and you're confident, and you're comfortable, and you're advocating, and you're doing all these things. And I think there can be this assumption that it's that the trajectory looks like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that there's not challenges and obstacles and frustrations and some of the things we've read about in our kind of statement or in our competency here. I didn't know like all of this stuff. Even when we met the other day, I'm like, I didn't hear that story about this. The reason I asked Kari to come is because I had this moment last spring where my wife and I were attending a local convention, a DFL convention, where we were electing who do we want in our little local space to represent us? State senators, Congress people, that sort of a thing. And Kari was there, and there was this, I'm sure it had its place at one point, rule within the DFL convention that talked about we want gender equity. And it sounds wonderful. We want to have equal representation of the genders on our slates as we are presenting people. And so there was a particular, I don't even remember what we were trying to elect people for, but we had more, I believe it was women on this slate than we had men. And so the rules of this convention were such that we couldn't move forward until we had equity. We needed equal number of men and an equal number of women. And, this ignorant person is sitting in chair, kind of like, okay, well, I guess the next step is who are we going to be like next? And then somebody steps up to the microphone, and I can't remember if I wrote this down earlier, but just again, started speaking to this particular rule. And you spoke in a real confident, comfortable way. And I'm like, this woman seems like someone who's been speaking comfortably and confidently for a while now. So that just really stood out to me. And there's other things that, I'd like you to talk a little bit about this moment, this rule, like what happened in that moment for you that led you up to this microphone to kind of challenge this rule. And then what were some of the outcomes, and just to kind of talk about a little bit more about what is it you recognize being identifying as a female in a position of whether it's your corporate job or just in this public space. What continues to be challenges that you recognize doing the work?
Yes, thank you. That particular event, I was watching, there were 3 women and there were 2 men. And the 3 women, everybody had a chance to talk about why they wanted to do it. And I was like, these 3 women are great. Why can people not vote for all 3? And just before that stage, there had been, on that stage, there had been somebody who had come in and said, isn't our city great? Because we now elected all women to the city council. And I was like, interesting. We can have an all-female city council and everyone explodes in applause on that. But in the own structures that are set up here, we have to have it be equal men and equal women. That's weird. And now I know it was set up because at a point, the men were all in power. So they were trying to make it so women would get a chance to get a foot in. But yet sometimes structures can inadvertently pull back on other progress that may be seen as important, right? And so, yeah, so there's somebody that I know who's in the audience near me, and she knows procedure really well. I'm like, where do I go? What do I say? When I go, if I go up there to comment on, once this vote's done, she said, say you want to take a point of personal privilege. So if you go to a city council meeting and you want to make a comment, just say, I have a point of personal privilege, I want to make this comment. So I went up, and I knew that, but I wanted her to tell me procedurally. So I went up to the mic, and I had written some thoughts down, but I said, when this vote has happened, I would like the people who were elected to take back to the body that this rule that's in place about this balance is not necessarily great. And then I started describing, as a woman, I have been called bossy, assertive, like that's a bad thing. If it's a man and it's assertive, that's a good thing. If it's a woman and it's assertive, or if it's a man, men can be confident, but a woman, you're bossy. It's a different set of standards that are held for men and women. And that makes me even more irritated. But I was very calm in describing this and just say, and then the guy who was the parliamentarian was like, that's not what we're discussing right now. And he tried to shut me down. And the audience behind me freaked out. They were like, this is exactly the point of what she's getting at. Like, let her speak. I have 2 rings that I wear with me every day. And they are exactly about this. One of them is a ring. There's no coincidence I wear them on my middle finger, I will be honest. One of them is I'm speaking from 4 years ago. Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate was interrupted by Mike Pence. And the other is nevertheless she persisted, which was Elizabeth Warren was on the Senate floor and was speaking, and Mitch McConnell tried to shut her down. And so she went in the hallway and kept talking to the cameras about the topic. And then Mitch McConnell commented, well, nevertheless, she persisted. And it's like, yeah, sometimes I'm just going to keep persisting because I have to persist, because no one else is going to be persisting for me or to represent others' voices. And I think in your careers, the path that you all are going on, you're going to hit walls. You're going to hit a lot of walls. And it could be a wall that you're hitting because you're a woman. It could be a wall that you're hitting because somebody may not like the organization you work for. It could be you're hitting a wall because maybe there's a different way you could approach it. But it doesn't mean that you stop at that wall. Your job is to figure out, do I go under the wall? Do I go around the wall? Do I go over the wall? Your job is to advocate for your people and to help make that happen. That resiliency is hard. But no, I've always been confident. And there are many things I'm not confident about, and the things that I'm not confident about, I've tried to figure out how to get confident in them. Like if I didn't know financials well, then I wanted to be able to learn more about that. I have worked to be able to focus on my, in high school, I signed up at church to be one of the readers because that would give me experience public speaking. I think look at the people that you admire and look at the skills and qualities they have. And if you want to have them, then think about the things you have to do to be able to give yourself that skill set. How are you going to build your confidence in something that you don't have, right? So I've always felt like at one point my cooking wasn't that great, so I spent a lot of time watching people who cook well, and now I'm pretty good at it, right? So just the things that you want to learn, figure out how to dig in on them. It's hard though. But does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I've got one more question, and then I want to, I think, pause and see if people have some questions. I'm not going to make the assumption that this was present, but if it was present, how in a moment like that, and you've likely had other moments where you're taking a stand or you're stepping out on something, what are some of the internal narratives or dialogue that might be happening? Again, maybe they don't happen, but if they don't happen, maybe as you know, why would that be? You know, how have you managed to not have that internal dialogue, that internalization kind of happen because of the society and world we have? And if it is present, how do you navigate through that internalization or that perception of judgment or how you're being perceived in a particular moment?
That's hard. I've had to come to a place in my life where I worry less about being liked, and I worry more about being kind and being respected, if that makes sense. So I don't want to be unkind to people. And I try not to be impulsive in like professional settings. But when you're at a city council meeting, for example, like I don't know what somebody else is going to say from the audience, or I generally know what the staff are going to present on because they get a packet and we read it. But all the council members that are up there with me, I don't know what their answers or questions are going to be. And my job is to moderate the conversation and make sure everybody gets a chance to speak and make sure we also end up at a decision. And so I have to offer my opinions and at the same time facilitate other people's opinions coming out. That's hard. So someone may have an opinion that I don't agree with. And I may just be like, are you kidding me? That's what they're going to say. But I can't say that. I mean, I could, but then I would look like a jerk. So I focus on being kind and being clear and pulling out and teasing out, asking questions to help illuminate. There are times when something happens and I don't decide to speak out. I don't want you all to think I run around calling out everybody on everything. Like you have to be judicious about when it is you're going to do something and when not. And it's okay to sit with discomfort. It's okay at a city council meeting, for example, for different people to have different opinions. So I'll give an example. We were debating, we have a public safety model in our city where police, fire, EMS are combined. Different cities have different models. Some have them as they're totally separate departments. Ours are interconnected. And we had a couple of people that have been questioning our model of having school resource officers. Now, I know our school resource officers, my kid, both of my sons actually joined Police Explorers because they met the school resource officers and they found it valuable. And I know that my kids are committed to social justice and but I understand why those questions are there. So you have to be willing to live with both. You have to be willing to understand two sides, two perceptions, two viewpoints, and if you really still feel you're grounded in yours, then you have to figure out what is it that will help illuminate others' paths to maybe agree with you at some point, or maybe more data comes out that helps you understand, wow, I was really off base on that. So we had meetings and it was like, yeah, well, we really want to know what kids think. What do the kids believe about this? Not just what we adults all say is good and not the school district likes it. And it's like, gosh, there has to be data somewhere. And then at some point we ran across that the Department of Education in Minnesota has been doing a longitudinal test on a number of topics of students. And they do it in like 5th grade, 8th grade, I think it's like 9th and 11th. There's like a whole bunch of ranges, and school resource officers are one of the questions. And you can drill to individual schools, and we were able to get that data. So the next year when it came up, we had that data, and they were like, oh, good. Now we know that the students really like it, and the students of color like it more than the white students. That was like illuminating for people that the students of color felt connected to and valued in the particular school we were referencing, Irondale, that they wanted that. So that being said, like you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to not jump to an opinion. You have to be willing to hear others. There's a book I read years ago, The Untethered Soul, and it's basically about meditative practices of sorts, but it's about separating yourself from the story and sitting back in the seat of self and watching the story. And I have to do that a lot. I can't get swept into the movie. I have to step back and watch the movie play out and then say my lines when it's the right time. Does that
Yeah,
help
I
to?
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um,
You all have questions?
Yeah, let's pause. Do you guys have questions on anything?
I'm curious with you professing as Catholic and your husband is Jewish, or at least
Jewish.
Jewish.
Joking.
Yes, Jewish. Yes. Yes, I'm wondering like how that relationship impacted like how you live out your faith, or also like what it looks like to interact with different religions within New Brighton and beyond.
That has played out in New Brighton because I was hearing in a lot of ways that we have a large Muslim community that we never really had reached out to as a city. And so I attended a community iftar in Golden Valley, which is like a breaking a fast meal that you share with friends and family during Ramadan. And I was like, we could do this inexpensively, get sponsors. And so we held our first community iftar a year ago, and then we held one just this year. And I had Muslim community members say that they lived in our city for 30 years, and this was the first time that they felt welcome in our community. Isn't that amazing? That faith, we try and separate that out from people's human experience, but it's really about it's part of who they are. And so in our family, there are moments that are hard because we don't share certain things. And so we have to work our way through that. So he knows now, like, not to tell me that he's not going to come to Christmas Eve Mass. Like, that'll just make me mad. And it's okay because we go to a really welcoming Catholic community in Minneapolis, St. Joan of Arc. It's the one that often would get in trouble with the archdiocese because they're really welcoming to the LGBT community. They have, they'll take he and change it to she sometimes. And so, like, God doesn't have to be a man. God could be a woman. So it's very open. And my husband will jokingly say, like, he can go and feel like he understands it all. We have friends there. So we have a broader community. They're called the Church Ladies. They were the first ones on the dance floor at my son's wedding. So, like, all's good. Like, I feel like we've come to this place. But, there are times where, an Easter basket to him is an Easter basket. It doesn't mean anything more than that, right? And I have to accept that that's his point of view. I jokingly tell him I'll perform last rites before he dies and he'll end up in heaven at some point anyway. But, we have lots of jokes that go back and forth. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So it sounds like you have a lot of different titles, like mom, wife, worker, leader, mayor, et cetera, et cetera. So like what, like taking a step back and looking, what do you feel like has fulfilled you to like keep getting up on Monday morning and doing the week?
I definitely know that my job, my day job, having a day job, supports portions of our family's life. And that's important for me to know that I can provide for our family in that way. So that's important to me to have that professional connection. It doesn't matter what job it is. It's just like I'm out in the community and I'm doing something, right? So maybe someday I'll retire from my day job and maybe I won't be mayor, but I'll be doing something. Like doing something outside of my home is important to me. And if you were to see my home right now, there are like Christmas ornaments all over the kitchen counter that haven't been put up on a tree. And I walk past them and I'm like, but I know that what I wanna like get them up and make my house feel like I want it to feel, but that's not as important as my going to my city council meeting, coming here, like doing other things out in the world. That's what probably brings me the most joy. So it doesn't have to be a job, but it has to be a way that I'm like making something better in this world. That's important to me. Is that helpful? Yeah. I mean, I love my kids. I love my husband. So it's not about them. So I'm not picking doing something in the world over them, because to me, it's not a choice. I shouldn't have to pick between them. But it's easy. An easy response is like, oh, I love my kids. I love my husband. And it's not that I don't love them. Like there is a thing in me. I gotta change the world. And it could be like when I volunteered with the marching band and we were making the marching band better, but also there are other things too that I feel like I can contribute.
I guess this is building off of that question, but in what ways do you like practice work-life balance or work to maintain that, and also like having boundaries between your work life, especially when it is so integrated into the community you live in?
Yes. So I have 2 different phones. I have different note-taking tools that I use. So the 2 don't mix, because that would be inappropriate for my elected work to influence the other. I think it was noted that during campaign season, I'm working those 2 jobs and I'm running for office. That's even another set of work that you have to do. So balance, you have to accept, isn't always going to be there every day or even every week. You have to find it over time and decompress or check out at certain points. Delegate where you can to someone else. So for example, when as a mayor, people might email me on certain policy questions. I can answer those, but I will forward it to the city manager and have him respond, and I'll include the resident. The city manager will respond to your question. He has some good information of things that we've been working on in the city. I have to let go that I perfectly could answer that question. Well, of course I could, but I don't need to, right? I have to, at my day job, I have to accept that I could work another 10 hours a week, and I have done that in my career, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm empowering others on my staff to learn to do some of those things. So we're working on a report right now, and someone on our team, I just said to her, these edits, I think you can work on all of this, and you bring me in if you need me. Go forth and be amazing. Like, let it go. Just letting go of some things, that's part of the balance. Because it's easy to in Minnesota, the advice they give you if you hit a patch of ice, what you should not do when you're driving your car. What should you not do? Brake. What else? Grab the steering wheel. Grabbing the steering wheel, right? Braking and grabbing the steering wheel will get you in a ditch. You're supposed to lightly guide the car to not fishtailing that way. You can do that in life too. You can brake too hard and you can grip the steering wheel too hard and end up in a ditch. So part of balance is knowing how to guide yourself to that place where you can pull over and take a vacation, or guide yourself to a point where you're able to think clearly. But there are going to be times where it's going to be wild in life. And there are going to be times where you think you're taking it easy, and you might find yourself in a position where you're not. And so you just have to, like somebody in your family could get sick, or someone could lose their job, and you just have to adapt to those moments. So yeah, when you think that life is going well, it won't very shortly. So just be prepared.
Maybe one more question and we'll wrap up. I know
And I can stick around if you have more questions.
students, otherwise I know Michelle also had a hand up.
It was pretty much,
Oh, same thing.
how
Okay.
you get away, like how do you take care of
Yeah.
your self-care and getting away from the love of it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Any other questions here? I'll have one last one then, and it might be more just related to like people in my life.
Yeah.
I notice who don't hold a male identity based off of some of the things you just were sharing about this balance. Thoughts about maybe overcompensating, if that's the right word. I don't know if that's the right word, but I know there are some people in my life that feel a very prove kind of mentality. Like it's hard for them to take balance or to step away or to delegate because they feel like they have to do like 10% more than someone else to kind of be seen as deserving of the space or whatever. I don't even know.
Yep.
So I'm curious, have you gone through, has there been a space of like, yes, that season felt familiar to me at one point, or have I never felt that? Or how did you get that hump over that hump of having to like kind of compensate or overcompensate for things that you don't have to, but you feel this need to based off of how others might be perceiving you?
I don't know that you ever get over that hump, but I think you get smarter at seeing that hill coming toward you. And knowing when to be Teflon and let it just roll right off. And like, okay, consider the source. Like I was at a regional council and mayor's meeting on Monday, and the mayor from Savage, Janet Williams, is retiring after being mayor for over 20 years. And she said to the mayors in the room, you've never had a resident tell you that you should wear blue eyeshadow because it'll make your eyes pop on TV, or they tune in to see what you're wearing. There are just some things that are just you're never gonna be able to address or deal with. You just gotta let those things go. You're like, okay, you're gonna be that way. So the things that I can make a difference in, you focus there. And so you will always, in some ways, be facing barriers, but and they can sometimes come in unexpected locations or from unexpected people. I remember I had a female supervisor, and I would think she would be all about like supporting women and their growth and professional development. And she was one of the grumpiest people I've ever worked with, but she just was, nothing made her happy. And that was not about me. Again, you have to kind of consider it and place it where it's at and then decide, am I staying in that job or am I moving to a different one? And I chose I needed to move to a different one. So you just have to adapt. That's where I talk about like this resiliency and adaptation is like not getting hung up. Just, it's easy to fixate. Now, there are things that I certainly have lots of self-doubts all the time. Like, did I handle that well? What should I have done differently? We didn't get unanimous votes on that issue on city council. Should I have done something differently? Should I have been making our city staff put out different data or been pushing them differently? So that's good self-reflection. You should always be questioning decisions or things that happen and how you could do it better. But the real trick is to not take it personally and let it eat at you on the inside. You just have to be able to park it and observe it and live with it and keep moving. I mean, to the point of like, my life, I've made tons of mistakes on so many things from up to last week or even probably 2 hours ago. And you just have to say, like, you have to learn from those and move forward. You can't let that impede you from continuing to do things.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's hear it for so there will be a class coming in here shortly, but I know some people came in, I think, after you started, so if you didn't get a card from Kari, feel free to grab one. And if you want to, stick around and ask some questions, you definitely can. Again, just knowing that a class will be in here real shortly. But thank you so much. And find her on LinkedIn, get hooked up, build your network.
Good luck.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, stop. I'm like, how do you stop? Yeah, absolutely.